humans had ever existed, they were extinct, incapable of threatening the present order. Politicians demanded calm, insisting panic would only fuel rumors. Then came the night when entire sectors reported their skies gone dark, not from collapsed stars or cosmic phenomena, but from something else, something moving. Vast shadows passed over moons and stations. Civilian worlds looked upward to see their suns eclipsed. What they thought were meteor storms resolved into shapes, hulking, angular ships aligned in perfect formation. No insignia, no broadcast, silent as the grave. The archive's oldest phrases came alive. The fleet they said never existed. Every telescope, every sensor, every frightened eye confirmed it. Humanity had returned, not as legend, not as memory, but as fact. The silence before the storm. The Conquered's mightiest armadas scrambled. Warships of a dozen empires gathered in orbit above fortified worlds, their commanders straining to steady their trembling crews. Across the galaxy, transmissions demanded negotiation. The humans gave none, not a word, not a warning. Their ships simply hung there, impossibly vast, eclipsing stars with their hulls, their presence suffocating. Admiral Dareth of the Conquered fleet watched from the bridge of his flagship, gnawing at the edge of his pride. "They don't even raise weapons," he muttered, "as though they need not bother." Then the first human broadcast came, a simple line carried across all frequencies, in a tongue thought long dead yet understood by every translator instantly. "You forgot us, we did not forget you." The words chilled every spine. Fire across the void. The battle began not with warning shots but with inevitability. Conquered fleets fired first, plasma storms, rail cannons, energy beams saturating the void. The human ships did not flinch. Their shields drank the fire as though it were mist. Then they answered. Columns of light roared forth, lances that carved through capital ships in a single strike. Entire formations vanished in silence, their wreckage scattered like ash. Conquered admirals barked orders, but their fleets collapsed in minutes. What shocked the galaxy most was not the power, but the precision. The humans struck only the warships, sparing civilian transports, sparing orbital habitats. Their violence was terrible, but controlled, measured, as though reminding the galaxy of the difference between power and dominance. For every conquered dreadnought that fell, 1,000 alien eyes opened to the truth. These were not myths. These were not forgotten stories. Humanity was real, their fleet vast, their technology unmatched. And they had returned not as refugees but as conquerors, or perhaps as judges. The aftermath of shadows. When the smoke cleared, the stars seemed dimmer. The Conquered's proudest fleets were shattered, their leaders broken. In the halls where laughter once mocked the name of humanity, silence now reigned. Whispers spread across the galaxy, faster than any ship. The humans are back. The fleet, they said, never existed darkened our skies. We thought them myths, we were wrong. Some whispered in fear, others in reverence. A few dared hope, wondering if humanity's return was not conquest but warning, a demand for respect, for remembrance. Yet one truth bound them all. The galaxy could no longer pretend. Legends had stepped from shadow into light, and nothing would ever be the same. A myth dismissed and ridiculed. For centuries, humans had been nothing more than a whisper in the halls of alien academies, a subject of idle ridicule and amused disbelief. Galactic historians, elite commanders, and members of the High Council would laugh at the very notion that a species like humans had ever existed, much less one that had left a mark on the galaxy. "You really believe they were real?" Commander Zulthan scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain as he leaned back in his seat within the council's war chamber. His eyes swept over the gathered members, each more established and respected than the last. They were discussing ancient myths from the First Age, passed down through oral tradition. A sharp laugh echoed through the chamber as an older historian, a respected alien from the Sordai system, waved a dismissive hand. Humans. Oh yes, they were the stuff of legends, stories we used to scare our young ones. Primitive, violent, and foolish. A species that vanished eons ago. Hardly worth our time. Zoltan's eyes narrowed. But there are records in the galactic archives, he said, scanning through the database screen. They say humans controlled entire star systems once. The room fell silent for a moment, but only for a moment. A junior officer raised his hand. It's just a myth, sir, a story. No one ever found proof. We've encountered enough of their relics to know they existed, another officer spoke. There are traces of their influence, ancient ruins on distant planets, nothing more. But no actual ships, no weapons, no fleets. They couldn't have been as powerful as these old records claim. The historian laughed again, shaking his head. Oh, sure. There were rumors of a fleet, the so-called Great Armada of humans, but even the most seasoned explorers believe it was a fabrication. The galaxy would have remembered if they were ever truly as formidable as their stories say. The myth was dismissed. That was the consensus. Humans, the beings who had once stood at the pinnacle of galactic power, were reduced to mere footnotes in ancient legends. Even the very idea of them had been laughed at, studied, and tossed aside. A signal from the void. But then came the signal. At first, it was nothing but a faint anomaly, a ghost in the system, picked up by the Galdar research station on the outer rim. Only a few specialists had even noticed it, but even they had dismissed it as a glitch, a false reading, or some stray interference. After all, the myth of humanity was long buried in the past, too distant to matter. They assumed it was simply the whisper of a solar flare or a rogue satellite malfunctioning. But the anomaly persisted. A low-frequency transmission, barely detectable, had been received on the far side of the system. Its cadence was unlike any of the known species' communications. No one could identify its origin. It was coming from deep space, beyond the range of their usual scans. A few scoffs later, the scientific community had reluctantly decided to take a closer look. After all, what else was there to study out here on the rim? As they traced the signal's path, the same question kept coming up. Where had it come from? The frequency was not one recognized in their databases. It was an ancient code, buried deep in the archives, one that they had long since dismissed as nothing more than human myth. I think it's time we look at the records again, one officer suggested quietly, eyes flashing with an odd sense of curiosity. The others weren't sure what to make of the suggestion. Their skepticism was rapidly turning to unease. Could it be? The myth becomes a reality. The fleet emerged out of nowhere. It wasn't just one ship, or a handful of ghostly vessels drifting through the stars. No, it was a fleet. An entire armada, one the likes of which the galaxy hadn't seen in eons. Massive warships, their hulls dark and imposing against the backdrop of the cold vacuum of space. The lights of distant stars flickered and seemed to dim as the ships moved into position, a coordinated formation. And as they appeared, it became painfully clear to the galactic leaders. The myth they had laughed at, the stories they had mocked, was now standing before them in the flesh. "Impossible," murmured Admiral Core, his face pale as he watched the signals. The armada, the one that had never existed, now filled their monitors. Their ancient weapons systems hummed to life as if the very stars themselves had recognized their presence. A ripple of disbelief swept across the council chambers. "This can't be happening," one historian breathed, staring in utter shock at the live data feeds. The ships were too large, their technology too advanced, and yet they were unmistakably human. And then one ship broke formation and began a slow descent toward the center of the galaxy, heading directly for the heart of their military stronghold. It was then that it hit them. The humans had returned, not as a myth, but as conquerors. The legend was real, and their fleet, the one that had been whispered about in hushed tones, was now a very present and very terrifying force. The humans strike back. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council had no answers. Their myths